Hi, this is Mahesh Ravi, and today I want to introduce you to a tool that I just wipe coded, and it's called Griddy. Let's get into the tool first, then I'll tell you what exactly does it do. So you can go to my website, maheshravi.com, and click on App Explorations, and you will find Griddy right here. So if you click on this, the tool will open like this in a URL, and this is the interface that you will see. So basically, the Greedy tool, what it lets you do is that it will give you a blueprint for your design layouts. So there are a couple of things that you can do in here. But why this is really important is that when you're actually exploring different ideas, when you start setting up your layout, that's a very important part of your graphic design process, right? How do you arrange elements in your design real estate? So usually when you have a lot of thought in your mind about the content, about the colors, about everything else, this is something that you will think about at the end of the project. And that's when the layout becomes too clumsy or crowded and the content density will be too big. So to avoid that, you can actually start with a blueprint. And it's not your typical grid system, right? It's slightly different. So let's see how this works. So if you go here, you can see there are different aspect ratios based on the project that you want to work on. You can choose an aspect ratio. And you can see already there is a grid. There is sort of like a diagrammatic blueprint that is loaded here. So it's a framework. It's not the exact grid that you're using. It is a visual, what you say, starting point where you can basically arrange your elements, right? So this is where you can maybe put an image. This is where you can put some text. And these are the boundaries that you should use. And you can add some image here. You can add a block of text here. So it's basically giving you that sort of a guideline where visually, whatever you want to fill into these columns and boxes, you can do that. But it'll still give you a structure based on a couple of design styles, which I'll talk about in a bit. So you can change your aspect ratio quickly like this based on the format. But if you come down, there is some interesting stuff here. So the composition engine gives you the control to make the layout complex or simple. So if you just take the slider, this is right now in medium, you can make it to simple. So it gives you a simple structure where you will see like how elements actually work. So there is a big type here. There are a couple of blocks. It is divided into a couple of sections. You can actually use some elements in here. Uh, you can also go to minimal where it is going to be a very basic layout. It still will have a style to it, but it'll have a very basic layout in here. You can also go to an extreme a chaotic composition. So if you're creating something like a futuristic poster, with a lot of content in there, and you want to throw in a lot of data there, you can definitely have this as your working space, right? So you can have a dense, you have medium, whatever your style, your vibe for the content is at that point, you can do that. Now, this is also something very important. This is the contrast between these elements, right? How different this needs to be with each other. So if you actually make the contrast to uniform, you'll see that pretty much every element balances itself, right? The scale contrast is going to be the same. You can actually make it balanced and you can make it extreme so that the sizes will vary drastically, right? This is, again, depending on your style, you can actually adjust this before you start. You can also lock certain systems and work on the other stuff when you randomize things, right? So you can say that, okay, I like the grid system of this design, but I want to change the complexity in here. So the grid system remains the same, but the complexity changes like that, which you will be able to do it for a lot of things in here. Now, if you come down, you can actually turn what do you need. So if you just don't need certain things in the thing and you just want a very rough layout, you can do that. You can also turn on the labels for the utilitarian styles. You can make it show the margin safety boundary here. You can also turn on the grid overlay that comes behind this. You can go to a light theme, so you will get a light theme. Again, depending on the design that you're creating, you can definitely switch to whatever theme that you want. You can increase the stroke sizes. So again, based on the visual style that you want to work with, you can do that. You can also come here and you can click to randomize this particular layout, right? So you just click on this and it will create a combination, a different combination all the time, and it will give you something that is really interesting to work with. You can also change this manually. You can enter the number. You can copy this, save it somewhere, and then if you want to create that again, you can just come here and do that. Right? Paste that here. So this is what it actually does. Once you do this, there are a couple of ways that you can export it. You can export it as a JPEG if you just want to use it as a reference. You can export it as a PNG to overlay it as a transparent layer. You can also export it as an SVG, which is the whole thing is scalable so that you can actually take it into a composition and scale it to fit that document size, no matter however big that is. So for this exercise, this tutorial, I'm just going to download the JPEG version of it, and we have the JPEG version of that right now. Now let's get into a design tool and let's start using this. All right. So let's go to Photoshop. Now the process is pretty much the same thing like that you regularly do with any design tool that you usually use. So I'm just going to use Photoshop for this. It comes in like this, right? It fits right like that. So it is basically saying that okay, this is where the whole stuff is going to go. It sits there. You can maybe select this, you can lock this layer, and you can add all the design that you want based on this grid, and then later you can erase that. So I'm just going to fast forward the process of design. I'm not going to talk about that, but after that we will see how this actually helps our design composition, right? So see you at the end of this video, right?